Welcome back to the Burning Branches podcast. My name is David, and joining me in the studios today are
Scott,
Darius,
Kenneth,
and Christian.
And today we're going to be talking about what it means to be a good steward, what it means to handle your talents well, and what it means to sow good seed. I'm going to pose this question to the table here. What does it mean to you to handle your talents well? Think about the stewardship of the things that you've been given.
I've heard it from my mom. I've heard it from my dad. Use your talent. You have a great talent. Like, oh my God, you're such a good artist. Like, when you learn to color in between the lines, like once you start like building the Legos and people like, oh, you have a good talent. I feel like you can be an architect. You can be an engineer. Right. Or hear my mom saying that, oh, you got to use that for something. Tony Evans gives like a great teaching on stewardship. And I learned something from that. And he makes me He throws a few lights on what I didn't know before. And he's like, nothing that we have as men or as women or men in general is ours. We need to understand that. And it was hard for me because I'm the one that goes and like drives to work. I'm the one that punches in the clock, swipe the card, and do the work. I'm the one that's at the table. Hey, welcome to this place. What can I get you? Yeah. I'm the one that had to work the tip. So when I get the tip and someone tells me that that's not for you, it's like, how does that make sense? And so that was something that was so hard for me to grasp. And it's like David says this, like the earth is the Lord's and its fullness, the world and they that dwell in it. And it's like, wait, so everything that I have, everything that I think I own is not really mine, it's God's? Yeah. Right. That was mind blowing and it's something that was so hard for me to come to grips with. But coming to that realization or coming to that shift in mentality makes me understand that if this is not mine and God's, how can I manage this from a place of management, not from the place of ownership? So now if I can manage this right, the owner sees my way of management, see how I'm managing what he's given me, and that's when the rewards come, I would think. Yeah. That's what my thinking is. And so now it's like, okay, you go to work, you make money. How are you managing the money? That's not yours, but you went to work and you earned it. You went to work and earned it, but now you don't even have it.
Honestly, you got to understand, like when you're working, like what is half of the work that we do here in America, right? It's actually just handling somebody else's business for them. Like whether you're a waiter, you're handling somebody else's restaurant, you're handling the front of the restaurant. If you're a cook, you're handling the food correctly. So what you're doing is you're really stewarding a part of their business. You're stewarding their thing, right? When we understand that, it's like we've stewarded their thing right, and they've given us a reward. That's our price. That's our wage. Yeah. It's interesting in Spanish they say premio. You would think like premium here in English, right? So it's interesting to kind of frame it that way. Like you've won that. Well, how did you win it? By stewarding somebody else's business correctly, by providing the service that their business provides. Right. And so then you take that home to your family, and now you steward your own because you gained it by stewarding somebody else's, right? Wow. And it's like the economy of God. And just to kind of throw a little bit of light where the language comes from, the language of steward is translated from the Greek word of oikonomos, which is where we get the word economy, right? Oikonomos or oikonomia. So we have to understand like that's God's economy, right? How does God's economy work? You help somebody else's thing and you're going to get a reward from that. If I handle your business correctly, well, even if you don't give me a reward for that, God's looking at how I handle that business correctly. And he's like, okay, he can handle this. He can increase somebody else's thing and therefore get his own reward. Yeah. When you were giving us that sort of vision, that's what I saw. It's like, you're handling somebody else's business.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. It's always been something that it was not a realization for me like before. It's something that never occurred to me. But it's like just understanding that the earth is God's and everything in it. Like he literally called everything into creation and everything that comes out of that is his because it's as a result of the resources that he gave us. Like if we think about like furniture comes from tree comes from God calling trees into existence. Sure. Okay, when we think about electricity, we use these water dams to propel the turbines that creates electricity. If we're looking at solar energy, we're looking at solar panels, right? We're looking at solar panels that uses the sun radiation to create energy. So every single thing derives from what God created. And so like me coming to a realization that every single thing that's around me is something that's not really anybody's. And once I understand that perspective, it becomes a perspective of, all right, God, you know what? This car that I have, as much as it's in my name, is not necessarily just mine. It's something that if someone's, hey, can I use your car? Like someone that I know, that I trust, can I use your car for like a week? I'm going on this trip to St. Louis. Like my brother asks me that all the time. Like when he's going to conferences, it's like, oh, can I use your car? It's like a 6 hour drive, 5 hour drive to St. Louis. And I'm like, yeah, it's absolutely fine. because I know that the car is not what's gonna make me feel like somebody.
Right.
It's not mine as much as in my name. It's not mine. You know,
Yeah.
right? Kinsley, my brother, you can use the car. It is fine.
Right.
And I think that's one way that God watches those particular ways we handle those things and see if he can give us more to handle. I'm not saying that God is going to give me more just for giving my car to somebody. That's not it. But just knowing that not anything that we have is not ours, but
Yeah.
God.
No, that's exactly right. And if you think about it from the very beginning, from creation, what did he do? He said, I give you dominion over this. Well, what does that mean? That means I'm giving you charge over it.
Wow,
I've made
yeah,
this thing.
that's true.
Now, what are you going to
Never
do
thought
with
about
it?
that,
Are you going to
yeah.
increase it? Are you going to shepherd it correctly?
Yeah.
Are you going to let it fall into ruin?
Wow.
And so from the very beginning, he gave man this commandment of dominion, this responsibility. And that's been handed to us. And what are we doing? We build cities, we build authorities, governments, and ways to manage things. But it all stems back to that. He handed us dominion and said, okay, now you're my children. What are you going to
Wow.
do with this? And I think about the way that sort of that parable is structured and how he says, Matthew, I forget the verse, but he says, those who have, everything will be given to them, and those who have not, everything will be taken away. Jordan Peterson has made a very interesting teaching on that, and basically, and there's actually so many studies that have been done on this. That's literally how nature operates. Things that have more resources, way more likely to get even more resources. I mean, think about how much money you can make if you had $1 million. You could invest in so many things.
Right.
You could build a couple businesses. You could really do a lot with $1 million. But if you have $10, it's so easy to just accidentally spend $10 on a Happy Meal. And then what do you got?
Right.
You have nothing. Then he goes on to apply it and says, if you give to the poor, if you give to him who doesn't have, if you visit him that is sick, you visited me. So what does that mean? It means you're investing in an economy that's even greater than the economy, than this world's economy, right? And so there's this turnabout of a lot of people think like I've got to do a certain amount of good deeds or whatever, and good, you should do good deeds, but why?
Yeah.
Well, it's because you've been given something to steward, and hey, it's a good thing to cause increase with it, but it's even better to increase somebody else who has only the $10. And now, how can they build themselves up? Well, then you can reach across through God's economy and lift them up even further. Not through money necessarily. You can even pour into them or help them.
But I also think there's got to be a realization as to what God has placed in our hands.
Yeah.
Like sometimes we don't have that realization, so we don't know what to manage because we don't know that we have it.
You need a paradigm shift.
Basically that. Just having an understanding as to like, all right, God has given you a job for a reason, or God has given me this ministry as a reason. Like just like even this Burning Branches podcast, understanding that this is something that we need to steward. It's something that we need to take care of as a team. And in regards to what we say on here, the things that we do outside of here, like we consecrate ourselves before we come behind the microphone, because we're not just going to put anyone behind the microphone, because at some point 30 or 40 or 100 people 1,000 people are going to listen to this, and we can't just throw anyone in the studio with us. And that's one way we can steward, because those are things that we need to realize. All right, God has given me my job for a reason. God has given us Burning Branches for a reason.
Right.
God has given me my car for a reason. Knowing that and just bringing that to focus will make it so much easier realizing that, okay, this is what God has given to me, and this is what I need to manage.
Right, but it's not even just a podcast or a
Right.
pulpit or whatever.
absolutely.
It's think about like what it took for every one of us to get here. Think about what it took for every other person that has what they have, what it took them to
Absolutely.
get there. They had to learn with the little things,
Absolutely.
right? First, it's like he was just in small things. He was good in small things. Can
That's
be
it.
good in a
That's
lot.
it. That's
You have
it.
to be given something insignificant
That's it.
to see what you do with it, to
That's
see
it.
if you know how to manage it.
That's
Right.
it. My pastor says that there was a point in his life where he was scrubbing the toilet of the church.
Yeah.
I know it sounds like, okay, what's the deal? But there's an understanding that there's got to be a level of servitude, like to all the people. Because imagine, like, say, you, Scott, being at work, or myself as a server, just taking the time out to just say hi to a person, or taking the time out to say, oh, hey, how's it going? Or taking the time out to acknowledge someone that's walking past us, or taking the time out to just say, oh, my God, that's a nice shirt. Where did you get it? Looks, that's a good color on you. Or taking the time out to say, oh, my God, that's a nice hat. I like what your hoodie says, or I like what your hat says. Like just taking the time to make another person seen is a way of serving what God has given us. and say some people might have the talent of bringing other people in.
Yes.
Like just bringing everyone in. Oh my God, when this person is around, they have a good energy. And it's like when they're not there, it's like the room feels flat. And there are people that are just good articulators of like their thoughts or good articulators of the word of God or whatever the case is. And when they're not around, you know that the communication is a little off because they know how to direct. So like knowing what these talents are and how we can use those talents to better serve God's people or to better serve the world or people in general. And I think that's something that I didn't know until recently.
Think about how God has stewarded us as his flock, because God calls us his sheep,
Magnificent, bro.
right? And think about like the lengths that he went to preserve his own. He went to the cross just to buy us back from darkness.
Wow.
He went to the cross so he could look at Darius and say, you know what, I don't see any sin on you. Why? Because I made a sacrifice for you if you'll accept it.
Right.
He said, I'll make you holy. I'll make you clean. You have to make that first step towards me, but I did all the work.
Right.
Wow.
And think about that. He reset economy. He reset all of economy.
The level of accountability, bro. Like the level of accountability to God himself.
Yeah.
It's crazy. It's crazy to think about it. Like you were saying, like Jesus hung on the cross for 6 hours with nails through his hands. It's ridiculous to think about it. Like, hey, I'm gonna be responsible for this specific thing, and I'm gonna create a path to redeem mankind back to me. It's magnificent if you really think about it.
It is magnificent, and I think there's a very important thing, and this is the thing that really tells us if we're around the right people, or tells us where the people around us are at. Jesus said, "I've loved you, and you need to love your brother like I love you." But he said more than that. He said, even the publicans, or even the tax collectors, even the thugs, they love their own brothers. He said, but you need to love the world like I've loved you, right? And so there's that reach out. There's that reaching out of love where it's your actions have, not necessarily that you have to be all lovey-dovey and super friendly with everybody, but the basis and the foundation for your actions has to be like out of love, and that challenges the atmosphere around
It's
you.
hard though.
Yeah,
because I remember like having a few conversations like over the past, and that this conversation demands me to show love, and you don't want to show that in that moment. It's like like I want to yell, like not yell as in like an abusive yell, but like scream while we have this conversation. But you're just you maintain your posture. Your shoulders are up, your chest is out, eye contact, just giving them that grace, that love. Like just showing them what they probably don't deserve in that moment. It's a hard challenge though. One thing I'll say though is like I feel like there's a few relationships that God placed in my hands over the past that I wasn't good stewards of. Like I wasn't a good steward of. Like I've made some very bad decisions when it comes to the people that God has placed in my life, and sometimes I regret not being in a position where I've had the wisdom enough to manage those relationships. But I think God calls every single person to manage the relationships that he put in our hands the correct way.
Yeah.
In a form where I've heard people talk about church hurt. And I've thought, like everyone is going to get hurt one way or the other because,
people are terrible and sometimes they can be like they have the potential to
basically
be so hurtful.
Basically. And so it's like, that's one thing that it really hurts my heart, that I know that like in my past, God has placed people in my life where I didn't really manage right. And I remember like over like July, August, like specifically, there was just like feeling within my heart that, all right, Kenneth, you need to manage really well what God, like the people God has placed in your life. You really learn to do that. Until then, I don't know. Until then, maybe I'm not ready for a family. Until then, you can't move into new seasons in your life because you can't manage that one friend that God has given you. You can't manage the 4 friends that people, just not managing a way of controlling. I don't want anyone to get the wrong impression here, but just being able to like speak life into them, just being able to be like, hey, you know what?
Good friend.
Yeah, let's go have dinner tomorrow. What are you doing tomorrow now? Let's go have dinner. Oh, you want to go to Goodwill together? Hey, you want, like, just being able to do that and manage those relationships, right? Is something that I think is basically a requirement because like 5 talents, 10 talents, they knew that the master gives you 5. I'm going to work this 5 and have a return on that 5. And that's a requirement to gain more.
Yeah.
So like, it's basically just known that requirement that if I want to gain more, if I want to have good stewardship, I need to understand that this little thing that God has given me, I need to work this out as much as I can to have a return on that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And there's an interesting verse. Actually, what was that verse in Luke 16, chapter 9? What did it say?
And I say unto you, make to yourselves friends of the mammon of unrighteousness, that when ye fail, they may receive you into everlasting habitations.
And it's interesting, and we'll have to unpack all of that, but it's interesting where he says, make friends of the mammon, right? Well, make friends of the unholy things. Make friends, like, the love of money is the root of all evil, right? And so it's like, but you still have to make friends with the money. Why? Well, because, hey, that friendship with that money, and it's not a friendship as like, I'm going to rely on it. You know that money's coming from God. But, hey, you need to make sure that you're doing it right. Make sure that you're using that money wisely, not, spending that money on going out to eat for every meal. But maybe you go out to eat once a week, or maybe not at all. You learn to cook at home. It's a good skill. It's a great talent to pick up. I recommend it. It'll get you far.
Amen.
But you take that and you say, you know what, I'm going to save the money, and instead I'm going to sow into the kingdom a little bit. I'm going to support a missionary. That's something spiritual you could do.
Oh, yeah.
Or you could say, you know what, I could put that aside for a rainy day fund. That's that Joseph stewardship, putting aside that seventh for the famine. Or you could take it and you say, you know what, I'm going to invest into my retirement. Or you could take that money instead of going out to eat. And that's just one example out of many about stewarding the mammon that you've been given. We have to understand that when we make friends with that mammon, why? We don't hate it. We don't despise it. We use it well. There are certain people in the Bible, don't get it twisted. There are people that Jesus said, sell everything you have, give all your money to the poor. That's a specific commandment. And there are times where we have to understand when we put things up on a pedestal. If I've got a Goldman Sachs investment account, I can't worship that thing. That thing's not going to get me through the storm.
Absolutely.
Because, what could happen? The entire economy could crash tomorrow.
Yeah.
But who doesn't crash? God.
Right.
There's a certain reliance there that we have to understand. But God does give us things to manage. And we could go all throughout the Bible with that, or we could even look into our own lives and look back at how we mismanaged financial things or material things or things. And we say, oh, well, I learned from that.
Yeah. I also think that we forget the principles that God caused after he created the earth.
Yeah.
Like, we know that when we throw something up in the air, the law of gravity is going to bring it right back down. Like, there's certain principles that's been set already that God can possibly change, like Jesus walking in water. He changed that principle of gravity. Like, there's so many things like water to wine. He changed that principle. We need to understand those principles when it comes to management. And I say that because I think sometimes we want God's blessings, right? But we want to change every single principle that he's put in place. It's like God is only good when we are saying a grace over our food, when we're about to eat breakfast or dinner or lunch, and then after we're done eating. But we don't want God to be involved in our household. He's only good from the beginning, and we just going to share the grace and leave. But we don't want him. We don't want to implement his principles to the way that we live our life. And I think that's a principle that's very off. But if we understand that God is in charge of it all, we implement his principles in every single way of our life. Like, the way to show faith is not about what we say, but it's where our feet is headed. It's like you could say you fear God, or you could say I believe in God. Well, you're saying it and saying that I'm going to have a course of mission, like to serve my community, to serve my church, or to do something that shows that you believe in God. Where's your feet planted? It's not necessarily about what you say. Yeah. But
and what did you do with the friend of yours who said, I'm hungry, I don't have anything to eat? What'd you do there? There's certain personal challenges. God puts those in front of us and says, okay, well, how are you going to manage this?
Absolutely.
How are you going to handle this one?
Absolutely.
And I think that's exactly right what you were saying. It's like those principles, right? A lot of people look at the 10 Commandments as a big list of don'ts. It's like, oh, well, don't do that. Don't do that. It's like, no, there's promise with some of them, like honor your mother and father. Why? You get long life out of it.
Right.
Like when you apply God's principles, there's always an increase. It's spiritual increase, emotional increase, mental increase.
Yeah. I always think one thing that God has called us to do is to fear him. And that's one of the most important ways of stewardship, like stewarding that very principle of fearing God. And that's one thing that's just, I can't really say this enough. Like, I knew of God and I respected God, but I didn't take God seriously in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I knew of God. Like, yeah, God, I know God created us. God did this for me. God did that for me. And I think the very call to me being a steward was me learning to take God seriously. And fearing God is taking God seriously. And me taking God seriously is like learning to invite God into every aspect of my life. And I think that's one form of stewardship that I was not even aware of until very recently. Yeah. It's like, okay, you know that God is real, and that God created everything, but are you inviting God into your daily life? Mm-hmm. Christian will say, it's to a point where he's asking God what he's going to wear. All right, God, should I wear the shirt? Like, to that very point where I'm inviting God to every aspect of my life. That's stewardship in a way, because you understand who owns it all, and you understand who gives it all, and you understand that he's caused us to manage what he's given us. And it's not until I realized that that this caused a shift in my mentality as to how I'm going to live my life, like in the near future or tomorrow, in the next hour.
I think for me, like one principle that I have gotten very good with is my time in worshiping God. And I dedicate my Sundays to God. I dedicate every day to God.
Amen.
We have to work and things like that. So like my Sundays are strictly for that. I don't do anything else but worship in my church. It's something that I really don't compromise. Growing up, I went to church every Sunday. So like I understand the principle of giving that day to God. That's the Lord's day, you know. I do know that a lot of people don't do that. You know, they don't give their time to God on Sunday. They do other things. The whole week they work. But that day that's free, they should be giving it to the Lord.
Why do you think that is, though? Why do you think people don't want to do that?
People probably don't want to do it because they don't know him. And they don't understand the principle behind it as well, like in the Bible, like what it says to worship the Lord. That's the Sabbath day.
Right.
Absolutely.
It's amazing how everything kind of comes into line when you actually do honor God and you put him first, and then you're like, okay, let me separate a whole day for you, God. And then there's a certain peace and a fulfillment that he gives. And then you walk away from it feeling like you just increased, like you just grew a little, like you really do. Like he really does grow you in that moment. Even though you dedicate it to him, he pours right back into you.
Right.
Absolutely. And to circle back and what Darius was saying, or the question that you asked Darius, I think people don't do it because people don't take God seriously, like I just said.
Yeah.
Not from a place of we don't know that God exists.
Right.
Yeah.
It's like we know that God is there. We know that God is He's the Alpha.
Right.
We know that he's the beginning of all of it all. But it's like when I say I don't want to go to church, God is not going to come down from heaven and be like, stop what you're doing, go to church.
No.
God is not going to do that.
No.
But our job is going to fire us if we don't show up. And so people tend to respect these earthly things more than respecting the principles that God has placed or command this earth to be on. Because they're in our mind, it's complete repercussions on this earth. Like if you're a smoker, if you smoke for like a few times, you know you're gonna have some lung problems, or we know that there are repercussions to these, and we fear those repercussions because we know that we see these things visibly, and God is just when we decide not to do something for God, God's not gonna come down and be like, oh, you didn't do this for me, so do this now.
Right.
But He's already laid down principles in the Bible about these repercussions.
That's how he built the world, right?
That's
He built the world with consequences, cause and effect.
There you go. There's a cause and effect to everything. There's equal and opposite reaction. You know, so if we don't understand the reactions that comes out of certain decisions that we make, and I think the first reaction that we need to understand is like, if we fear God and if we bring ourselves into alignment with God, then every reaction that comes out of that is going to be a positive reaction. Yeah, that's a principle. It doesn't change.
Right.
I want to build on what you said, Darius, and I think that's so important to remember to put God in his proper place and to, set aside a day for him or 2 days, set aside your morning for him or whatever the times you have set aside for just you and God or you and God's people or to worship. Another thing that I've seen, though, is like people who do that, they're like, I go to church every Sunday, and then they come back and then they don't have church any other day. Like they don't show love to anybody. They go to work on Monday, they cuss out their coworker. They turn around and do this, and it's like they check the box. And then they never decided to actually, show God's love. What does Jesus say? He said, if you love me, you keep my commandments, right? Well, why? Because those commandments are there for a reason. You know what I mean? It does increase you. It does grow you, and it grows the people around you, right? There's sort of a polar opposite on one end of the person would think like, I don't want to invest my time going to a church. I don't want to invest my time in worship. Because what am I going to get out of it? And then there's the other opposite of people who, they're religious, they want to practice and they want to check that box off and they want to say hi to all their favorite people and they want to have a nice little fashion show, and then they turn around and then they're yelling at the waiter that's got their meal, and it's like, what kind of witness is that?
That's not the love of God.
That's not, and then there's no love there, and it's like, well, if there's no love, then what are you investing in? You're not actually investing in anything, because if there's no love at the foundation of it, well, then you're not actually sowing anything into any kingdom. It's just your own.
Wow. I also think there's a call to respect the time that God has given us as well. Yeah. The time that we have on earth. What did David say? Like, teach us the number of days that I can serve you. Like, even with the talents, he calls the servants, gives 1, 5, 3, 1. But then they assess he went away for a long time. So what all three of them had was time. Yeah. They just didn't recognize it. And so we need to understand that our time here on earth is very limited.
Right.
And so understanding that time will cause us to act very swiftly or very urgently as to learning how to manage what God has placed in our hands. I think for we men, a lot of times it's just the relationships that God has placed in our hands. We're responsible for how we manage our tongue, the words that we say. That's one thing that
That's a big thing.
It's a huge thing for we men. We need to be good stewards of that. Like just building each other. That's one thing that we're so good at as a team. And I can attest to that, to the world, that we're so good at building each other up. Like, oh, that's a nice hat. Oh, that's a nice shirt. Oh,
well, even more than that, forget the pleasantries.
Right,
we want to like call out the best out of each other and be like, are you giving this to your all? Are you committing? Are you being accountable?
Literally.
That's the important. That's the meat.
And that's the beautiful
And
part.
if you don't have brothers like that, go get some.
Right.
That's a fact. This is a call to the word. If you don't have people that can build you up, that can hold you accountable. Like today, me and Scott was in the car. It's like, well, I did like 5 chin-ups, 10 chin-ups. I'm like, oh, I need to work out too. Like he didn't have to call me out that I wasn't working out, but he saying that, hey, I've been doing 100 push-ups a day, or I'm like, all right, I need to do. I guess in my mind, I'm thinking I have to be in the gym to get a workout in.
And you know what?
And Scott don't even have a gym, and he's getting a workout.
And I came in here, I'm looking at Scott. I'm like, man, this dude's chest is getting a little big. Like,
Scott, we peep you, bro. We peep you, bro.
Yeah,
Putting in that work, man.
And we have to be stewards of our bodies.
Oh, we definitely do.
You don't want to go into that, bro. You don't even want to go into
That's
that.
a hard word for some people.
Yeah.
Man, like I remember, like even right off the bat from Thanksgiving, bro, I was smacking like 3,000 calories, bro. Like just right off the bat from that. But you're right.
I'll keep him away from the Puerto Rican rice.
Oh, man, shout out to Sister Diane, man, with the Puerto Rican rice, man. It's legit.
My birthday's on Tuesday.
It's legit, man. That's all I want for Christmas, Sister Diane. If you listen to this, please. All right, it's good. But yeah, Scotty, like literally what you just said. I think we need to be good stewards of our body. Like it is the only vessel that we're gonna have till we transition.
Yeah,
it's the only vessel, and I love that we have people that can hold each other accountable on that. Like like Scott telling me a little bit about his story. Like at some point he was drinking 2 liters of Diet Coke or whatever the case is. I don't know if you want to. We're not expound on that. And I don't know how you got to a point where you weren't drinking that anymore. Like what caused you to stop doing that? Was it a realization about knowing that your body was a vessel?
God really revealed to me. God's given us this vessel that we have to take care of,
Yeah.
And if we don't take care of, it really, like me at work, the physical things I could do, even walking around helping customers, like it's important that we have a body that's working because, we are stewards of our body. We have to take care of our body to do.
There's no one better. There's no one better
do.
to say. There's no one better to tell us that than you.
And
you know that, Scott.
I believe like what he's saying, like, for example, let's just say your car breaks down,
right,
and you don't have a way to get to work. Well, you have 2 legs. You can use those.
You sure do.
You can use those.
Walk
but
to that
if you're
spot.
not able to, and you haven't been a good steward towards your body, and you can't get up and walk, then you can't go to work, and now you can't make money.
I worked with a guy. I didn't know him real well, but one time I remember his car broke down on his way to work, and he walked the rest of the way. And it wasn't like he lived down the road from where he worked. He lived like a city over, and it was like a half an hour drive. So he like broke down 15 minutes on the way there, which turned into like a 45-minute walk for him. And he just kept walking to work, He's just like, well, I'll leave my car here. I'll come back for it afterward. Yeah. He just walked the rest of the way. He's like, sorry, I'm late. Car broke down.
Wow.
And I was like, this man is an inspiration.
Right. Yeah.
I know, Scott. Like I know you went into that, but you shared a few of your story, like a little bit of like how you would walk miles, bro.
Yeah.
Like just. It's insane.
Yeah.
The amount of work that needs to go into taking care of our body. A lot of people wait till the doctor gives us a reason to take care of our body.
Right.
And it's like, why should anyone wait till then? Why should anyone wait till the doctor tell, hey, you're building so much cholesterol in your blood, or your cholesterol level is up, or you're diabetic, or in order for you to start not taking 62 grams of sugar in a bottle of can of Coke or whatever.
Right.
Like, why should we have to wait till then? Like, why do we need a wake up call as people? Why?
Wow.
I don't know why that is the case. Though.
Wow, it's like a normal thing in society. It's just the norm,
Yeah.
There's this old saying, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of care.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's like you could just be proactive about these things. You could be mindful and be a good steward about the things you've been given, and therefore you can use them to their fullest potential.
Why is it so hard though? Like, why is it so hard for us to do that? Like, why do we wait for a wake up call? Like, is it something that's innate in us?
I'm guilty, so that's why I have like a smirk on my face.
Well, I'm guilty too. That's the problem.
No. I really want to know because there's so many times where people are saying, "Oh, hey Kenneth, you know what? Maybe you should change the way you communicate." But it's like I needed a wake up call in order to realize that I'm actually a bad communicator. Why do we wait till wake up calls? My pastor usually says this: You don't want to wait for God to create a storm to get your attention.
Yeah.
Right.
Because a lot of time a lot of people wait for a storm to happen for God to get our attention. Like, why do we wait till that? Maybe we don't have a question, but it's something I always ask myself. Maybe your audience can comment. I don't know. It's just
have like a stupid text and we prolong the process.
Yeah.
And like, okay, like, all right, now I understand.
Now God got my attention.
But
You know?
really, we should just get it the first time.
Yeah.
But
I think about it like this. It's like he calls us his disciples, right?
Mhm.
Jesus says,
Right.
"You're my disciples."
Yeah.
Well, what's a disciple? Somebody who practices a discipline. Well, what is discipline? Doing the thing that's hard in order to get a reward that's like years away.
Take up your cross.
You take up your cross. You have to discipline yourself, like because the flesh, the flesh is strong and the spirit is weak. That's the nature. That's the balance.
Flesh wanted me to hit snooze this morning, man.
Right. But God poured that spirit into us and he said, "No, I give you my spirit." Why? So that we can overcome our flesh. Why don't you fast? Why don't you just not eat for an entire day and dedicate that entire time to prayer and see what happens? See what happens.
man.
See how much it changes you. You
That's
might
a
not
chal-
feel it
That's
at
a
first.
challenge to me right now, bro.
Right. And
you may not understand it, but like you said, it may be years away or a couple of days away.
Yeah.
But once it's effective and you see it working, like, okay, like, all right, now I want to keep doing this thing.
right.
Mhm.
Keep doing it and being consistent with it.
Right.
And that's where the discipline comes in.
And with losing weight, it was very much like that. You wouldn't see results right away,
Mm.
or you would feel lousy at first, but then really God would just tell you just to continue to go, just to continue to keep going, and
Wow.
and then you'd get the results down the road, that sustains you, that keeps you going
Love
forward.
it. Scotty with the
Hearing
compound
his
effect,
voice.
bro.
Yeah.
Scotty with the compound effect. Just like the $10 thing, the $10 analogy and the $1 million analogy. Like, it's so easy for us to just throw $10 away and spend it on something.
Yeah.
Because we don't see the magnitude of $10 or
Right.
$1. The same way, if we tie back into what Scott just said, like everything just compounds.
Mhm.
Imagine if you say $10 every paycheck.
Yeah.
And if you get paid every week, that's $40 a month.
Wow.
If you multiply that by $12, what are we looking at? Like $480 a year. If you could say $480 a year, that's basically a car note, or that's basically a Christmas gift. That's basically, I don't know, something. Like, we don't look at it as a compound effect. We don't look at it like this is going to build on that. That's going to build on that. And I was telling Scott, it's like, I haven't been to the gym in the past 2 weeks, right? And I'm trying so hard not to just go into the gym and just kill myself for like an hour and a half.
Yeah.
That's going to stop my body from having like a continual strength to have a consistency.
Yeah.
So what I want to do is just ease myself into it. Maybe do a 30-minute workout, a 45-minute workout, just so I'm not discouraging myself. Well, I want to do an hour. No, just gradually. It compounds.
Mhm.
Compounds every single day. Learning how to say I love you to someone, or if you have anger issues, learning how to deal with your anger. It's a gradual process. You don't just go from here to there. Something that it starts from just holding your tongue for a little bit.
Right.
It starts from maybe just peeling off, like, hey, you know what? I'm just going to get some air.
Yeah.
It just doesn't go away. Everything
Right.
is just a gradual process.
And think about how far you can apply that, right? That very principle of just, hey, stretch yourself a little bit here and stretch yourself a little bit there.
Right.
Maybe I'll start by saving $5 a week.
Yeah.
And then, hey, okay, there's my finances taken care of. Maybe if I start with doing like 5 push-ups a day. Like 5 push-ups isn't hard. For some of us, it's more than others. But, you start with 5 push-ups, and then eventually you do that. If you do 5 push-ups a day for an entire year, and then the next year you're going to be like, I can actually just do like 50 a day now.
Crazy.
Why? Because consistency.
Crazy.
Well, maybe I need to just eat off of a smaller plate every day. Maybe I just need to go for a walk every single day. I'm not going to miss my walk every day. I'm just being accountable to yourself and being accountable to what you've been put in charge of.
Mm-hmm.
It's amazing how big of an increase that goes,
Yeah,
right?
these baby steps.
Yeah.
Baby steps add up, man.
Absolutely. That's
Yeah.
what you do. I see Scott do this every time like we hang out to get coffee, and he just realized, like, even like on our drive here, he's like, well, I started with 10 push-ups, and now like I'm at 20. I'm doing 20 push-ups, and now it's like, okay, I got to do my 24th one. I'm struggling a little bit. My 25th one, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
But it started from 10 push-ups, and it's like he sees a growth. Like even last month, you did 100 push-ups every day, and there's 30 days in that month. So you did 3,000 push-ups in the month of November.
Yeah.
That's insane. Like if I think to myself, I'm going to do 3,000 push-ups, that's a lot. But what I'm thinking is, okay, I'm just going to do 100 today. I'm going to do 25 push-ups every single 3 hours or every single 2 hours, and just wait it out. 25 in the morning, 25 at night, and 50 maybe. I don't know, whatever. But
I
just,
used to do that.
but if you think about a 3,000, it's like, oh, this is an astronomical number for me to accomplish.
You defeated
But just,
yourself
yeah,
already.
basically. So just breaking, and that's something that Scott is so good at, like just a gradual process. Like you're so good at understanding what process is. And all of us can attest to that.
Yeah,
Even-
and it didn't come from nowhere. It came from God.
Absolutely
Amen.
not.
If God's told me because I lost 150 pounds.
Wow.
If
Wow.
he said, you know, you're gonna lose 150
150?
pounds. 150 pounds.
Get out of here.
I'd
Why?
be
You
like-
never told me that. Oh,
Or a
wow.
little over that, actually.
Oh, man. I need to
But-
come to you for some fitness routine
it-
because now you look like you weigh 160, bro.
Yeah.
Crazy.
So if he said, hey, you're gonna lose 150, I'd be like, okay. And then I'd be so discouraged. Like, how, God? Like,
Yeah.
how would I have lost 150 pounds? It was just these
Wow.
little victories he gave me along the way that
little
just kept me going.
victories.
And that's how it is with everything. you
Little
know?
victories.
It's beautiful
Yeah.
how God encourages us to keep on, keeping on. I remember, like, out of nowhere sometimes, like my pastor sent me, hey, Kenneth, I'm proud of you. And I've said this so many times off air with these guys. Not these guys, with my brothers. It's like God knows how to get people in your life that will get you to keep encouraging you to
Yes.
keep doing. Like, I'll walk out of church sometimes and David's like, Kenneth, you know what? You're not allowed to leave. And as much as it sounds controlling or anything like that to the audience, it's something that I like to hear.
Yeah.
It's like you mean so much. You add so much to the atmosphere. Sometimes, like, we're recording when Darius is not here or Scott is not here. Or like even last time we recorded with Secreta, like Scott was in here. It's like, man, we wish Scott was here. You know, just us recognizing the unity and how we all bring to the team
Yes.
as we understanding that God has placed these people to steward certain aspects of this specific environment. And we all recognize that.
And I think that's so cool about this is like we've all been given different personality type. We've all every person is given their own unique set of attributes
Oh,
and
yeah.
ways that they're being built.
Definitely.
And so when people actually start to combine together and the whole is so much greater than the sum of its parts, right? 2 + 2 is equals 8 at a certain point where it's just like when people can actually learn to steward the things. And that's why you need people next to you. You know, no man is an island. No man can do it alone.
Definitely not,
Because if you're
bro.
doing it alone, 2 = 2. But when me and you are together, it's not 2 + 5. It's 2 × 5.
Right.
It's not 7. It's 10. That's why all of us together, it's so much more. And that's why if you don't have people in your corner, that are like, hey man, I noticed you've been slipping. Like, why haven't you been working out? What's going on? Like, it challenges you a little bit, draws something out of you. So it's like, well, when's the last time you fasted? And it's like, well, actually, I don't know. You know, and it's like, well, why? Like, you're missing something.
I mean-
How is your job going? Like, it pulls something out of you where you're just like, oh, somebody else actually cares about where I'm
Yeah.
at right now. I think there's some people they can come out with a bad spirit, like, oh, you know, how is your retirement account? Like, mine's clearly much better than yours. And it's like, you don't have time for that nonsense. But if you're actually arm in arm with somebody, I like how the Bible labels people working together as fellow laborers. Because it's like you and I are working alongside each other. I'm at my job. You're at your job. I'm doing my ministry. You're doing your ministry. But we're together. We're fellow laborers. We're arm in arm. We don't realize how much what we're doing affects the other person
Oh, yeah.
and how much it impacts the other person.
I could literally attest to that today.
Yeah.
Like, we go out and have lunch. Christian, not to put your word out there, but Christian is fasting. He's with us. He's watching us eat. And the level of accountability that this man has to himself. I was convicted. We're eating 25 chicken tenders, bro. And I'm like, we're smacking on this thing. And this man is just sitting there drinking his water, bro. And right there from then, he wasn't telling me, Kenneth, you need to fast. He wasn't saying that. But his actions right there and then just pushed me to take that leap. Like, dude, try it. Just try it. Fast for a little bit. And that's what it did for me at that time. So your actions goes so far that we can even imagine it.
I just want to say this. We were in the coffee shop, and something happened to Ken
Was this with us? Oh, yeah.
that was annoying to you. You had every reason to be upset when you came into the coffee shop, but you put it aside, and you prayed about it, and you put it aside, and man, that God really was like, just pay attention to what he's doing here. And in fact, it happened to me before this podcast.
Wow.
Like, there's something that happened to me 5 minutes before we hit record that I could have let just consume me and let bother me.
Wow.
But I remembered that, and I'm like, I'm going to put that aside.
Scott, don't
And,
make me cry
I-
right now. Scott, don't make me
Yeah,
cry
but no,
right
like,
now.
no, you're right.
Oh, man.
We're all used
Hmm.
to build each other up.
I'm with you on that one, Scott. I can't tell you how many times, Kenny, that your actions have ministered to me where I would get ready to go into work and I would recognize that, no, my attitude isn't in the right place if I wanted to minister to someone, if I wanted to do well at my job and be a good steward of the skills and the time and the resources that I've been given,
Right.
or even the position that I've been given.
Right.
So thank you for that.
Oh, man,
Yes,
you
thank
bet.
you,
You bet.
God.
Bro, that was something else, man.
I concur.
Honestly, it's a lot when you see somebody and one of your brothers and you just know everything that they just passed through. And then you're in your situation. You're like, you know what? What would Kenny do right now? You know? And it's like, but that's the cool thing about being a spirit-filled believer is that you should be acting like Jesus, right? To where what would Jesus do should be the same as what would Kenny do.
Yeah.
Like that says something in that same attitude and that same mind space. There's a verse that I was thinking about when you were talking, Scott, and it's an interesting verse in Galatians. I don't remember exactly where it's at, but it says, "But bear ye one another's burdens." And then like 4 or 5 verses down, it says, "But every man bears his own burden." And it's like both are true. It's like we have to bear each other's burdens. But then, hey, when it's just you and God at night, like when you hit the pillow and your brothers are gone, like you're all in your own beds, you're just in your alone time with God, and it's like, well, what have I done to bear my own burden? But that's why we have each other in those moments where it's like, hey, man, you help me bear my burden. You don't even know that you did it, but you help me bear my burden.
Wow.
And that's ministry, right?
Yeah.
That is ministry.
A lot of people, they think ministry is the thing that your pastor's doing from the pulpit, or they think that the evangelist is coming to lay hand on you. That's ministry. Sure. Yeah, in its own proper place. But you know what's even better? Greater ministry is when there's somebody right next to you and they're speaking life into you. They're not even trying to, but they're speaking life into you. And, and it's flowing like a river out of your belly.
It's crazy, though, because all glory to God in all of this, honestly. And I want to be as humble as I can, as much as I can. It wasn't that like that before. David alluded to this a few episodes, like misery loves company. There are moments where, like, when I'm miserable, I want everyone around me to be miserable. Because why should I be miserable and you be happy? Like, why are you coming with me with all this energy? Man, stay away from me. Like, that, literally, that type of feeling. Like, it felt like insulting to the emotions that I was feeling at that time. But it's a gradual process where God works on you. And regardless of what you're going through, you go into a different room and you have the right posture, you know. And my pastor just exemplifies this so many times. He's been through a lot. People in his life that he cares about not being there anymore. I remember asking him, like, how did you go through this whole process and still stand behind a pulpit and pastor to your congregation after going through all of these specific things? And it's like, I just let the purpose push me. I just let God's the working of God's kingdom push me. Just, it's hard though.
And it's really cool that you bring that up, because I remember that exact service, because that was the first service that I actually started attending. So if he wouldn't have been there that day, who knows where I would be today. If he wasn't able to push through that pain that he was feeling in that moment and to minister, like, you know, who knows where we would all be today.
Yeah, and somewhere else, that's for sure. 100%.
Yeah.
And it's amazing the ripple effects that one man's decision and the discipline to stick to that principle, it affects millions. You know, what was it you said on the first or second podcast? You said, you know, imagine the actual network that we have, only 2 or 3 steps removed from 1 million. When one person decides to stand up and say, you know what, I'm going to stick to this principle. I don't care how I'm feeling. I don't care how destroyed I am. I don't care what blows that life is throwing at my face right now. I'm going to stick to this principle, and I'm going to do good, and I'm going to speak life. And it has ripple effects, and millions of people feel it. They don't know that they're going to feel it, but they feel it.
Like you said, I think the power of every man's decision is unfathomable. If you really think about it, if Scott would have made a different decision not to lose 170 pounds, I do need us to talk more about that. But like, imagine if you're not made that decision, we probably wouldn't have been here having this conversation at all. Now it's a testimony. It's insane. Like, Darius making a decision to be here, David making a decision to be here. So I'm going to make this time for this. But the decision to be here, knowing that there's a purpose to be pushed, there's God's glory to be gained through all of this, to a point where we got Scott, we got David, we got myself, just edifying each other behind the mic, to a point where we're edifying our pastors as well. I think it's just marvelous what power of what this every man's decision, the repercussions of that, if it's bad or good.
It truly is a ripple effect. You have no idea what your life is worth until you realize how many people it affects. We thank you for joining us on this journey when we were vulnerable. We hope that it blesses you in some way. Don't forget to like and subscribe, leave a comment.
Follow us on Instagram at burning_branches.
Leave a comment, leave a review, like and subscribe to Apple Podcasts.
Leave a comment on our YouTube.
We love you guys. Tune in next time.